A massive alien fleet drifted silently in the cold darkness of space, just beyond Earth's detection range. The Halthar, a warlike species known for conquering planets, had set their sights on this small blue world. Their ships, sleek and dark, like shadows against the void, remained unseen by human eyes. They had studied Earth for weeks, scanning its defenses, analyzing its technology, and preparing for an easy victory. Commander Vector stood at the bridge of the flagship, his sharp eyes focused on the glowing image of Earth on the main screen. He had led countless invasions before. He had seen worlds fall in flames, civilizations crumble before the might of the Xalfar. This mission would be no different. The humans were weak. Their weapons were primitive. They did not even know the fleet was here. It would be over in a matter of hours. A low hum filled the air as the fleet synchronized their attack systems. The soldiers stood ready, their claws gripping their weapons tightly, waiting for the signal. The countdown had begun. In a few minutes, the first wave would descend upon the unsuspecting planet. Vector allowed himself a small smile. The glory of conquest was near. But then, without warning, the ship's main screen flickered. The smooth glow of the battle interface distorted, shifting into something else. Words appeared on the screen, bright and clear, written in the Xalfar's own language. Do not attack. You are not alone. For a moment, there was silence. Vector's claws tightened into fists. He turned to his communications officer, a younger Xalfar with a nervous expression. What is this? Vector demanded. Who sent this message? The officer's fingers moved quickly over the controls, scanning for the source. His voice trembled as he replied, Commander, this message did not come from Earth. Vector's eyes narrowed. Then where did it come from? The officer swallowed hard. Unknown, sir. Whispers filled the bridge. The soldiers shifted uneasily. The fleet's communication network was highly secure. No species in this part of the galaxy should be able to break into it, especially not the primitive humans. Yet, someone had done it. Someone powerful enough to send a warning. Vector's tail twitched in irritation. He refused to be distracted by this trick. The attack must continue. He opened a command channel to the fleet, his voice sharp and firm. Ignore the message. Prepare to fire. But before the fleet could launch their attack, something changed. The lights on the bridge flickered. The screens glowed brighter for a second, then dimmed. The hum of the ship's engines grew unsteady, as if something was interfering with their power. Across the fleet, the same disturbances were reported, minor at first, but growing stronger by the second. A new alert flashed on the screen. An energy reading, massive and unidentifiable, had appeared behind them. The Xalfar ships turned their scanners toward the darkness of space, searching for the source. And then they saw it. A shape, larger than anything they had ever encountered, loomed in the distance. It did not appear on the fleet's radar, yet it was there, unmistakable. It was not a planet, not an asteroid, not anything that could be explained by normal science. It was a presence, watching them from the void. Another message appeared on the screen. This time, the words were even clearer. Leave now, or you will regret it. The soldiers on the bridge exchanged nervous glances. The air grew heavy with tension. This was no human trick. This was something else. Something ancient. Something powerful. Vector clenched his jaw, his mind racing. He had conquered many worlds, faced countless enemies. But this was different. The feeling in the air, the strange energy, the eerie messages, it all pointed to something beyond their understanding. For the first time in his long career, Vector hesitated. The invasion of Earth was supposed to be simple, but now it seemed they were not the hunters. They were the hunted. Vector's claws tapped against the control panel as he glared at the message on the screen. It made no sense. No species in this sector had the technology to break into Xalfar communication systems, and the humans were too primitive to even detect their presence. And yet, the words were there, written in their own language with perfect accuracy. The crew stood frozen, waiting for their commander's response. Tension hung in the air like a thick fog. Vectar's tail flicked impatiently as he turned to his communications officer. "Trace the signal. I want to know exactly where it came from." The officer's fingers moved quickly across the controls, running deep scans through the fleet's secure channels. His eyes widened in confusion. "Commander, the signal has no origin." Vectar's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" The officer swallowed hard. "It didn't come from any planet, ship, or station. It just appeared." Whispers spread through the bridge. Zalfar technology was the most advanced in this part of the galaxy. There was no such thing as a signal without a source. Vectar straightened, his voice firm. "This is an illusion. A trick. The invasion proceeds as planned. Prepare the first strike." Before he could finish, the lights dimmed again. The ship's control panels flickered, and a strange, low hum vibrated through the walls. The air felt heavier, as if something unseen was pressing against them. Then another alarm blared. A deep scan of the surrounding space had revealed something, an unidentified mass, just beyond the fleet's perimeter. It wasn't visible to the eye, but the sensors detected its presence, a vast energy field, shifting and pulsing in the darkness, watching them. One of the officers hesitated before speaking. "Commander, whatever this is, it wasn't here before." Vectar's patience was wearing thin. "Show me." The main screen shifted, displaying a visual of deep space behind them. At first, there was only the black void, dotted with distant stars. But then, the darkness itself seemed to move. A massive, shapeless presence loomed in the distance. It had no clear form, no distinct edges, yet it was there, vast, silent, and waiting. Its energy signature was unlike anything the Zalfar had ever encountered. It didn't match any known species, and it certainly wasn't human. Then, a new message appeared. "We destroyed you once. Do not make us do it again." The bridge fell silent. Vectar's grip tightened on the edge of the command console. His mind raced. This couldn't be possible. The Zalfar were the conquerors, the dominant force of the stars. There was no record of any species powerful enough to challenge them, especially not one that had beaten them before. Yet, something out there claimed otherwise. And it was powerful enough to disable their systems, to send messages directly into their secure channels, and to remain completely hidden until now. A sense of unease crept through the crew. The invasion of Earth had been planned as a simple conquest. But now, the Zalfar fleet was not just facing an enemy. They were being warned. Vectar's mind raced as he stared at the glowing words on the screen. "We destroyed you once. Do not make us do it again." The letters burned into his vision, their meaning clear but impossible to accept. No species had ever defeated the Zalfar. They were the most advanced conquerors in this region of space, feared by all who encountered them. And yet, someone, had sent this warning with absolute confidence. The bridge was silent except for the steady hum of the ship's systems, though even that sound seemed weaker than before. The crew shifted uneasily, their hands gripping control panels, waiting for orders. No one spoke, but the tension in the air was suffocating. The message had shaken them. Vectar clenched his jaw. He could not allow doubt to spread. This was psychological warfare, nothing more. The humans were weak. This was a trick, an illusion designed to stall their attack. He would not be fooled. "Full fleet scan," he ordered, his voice sharp. "I want every ship searching for the source of this interference." The officers moved quickly, their fingers dancing over their controls. Within seconds, dozens of scanning pulses spread out from the fleet, sweeping through the void. The main screen filled with data streams, energy readings, movement analyses. Then the results came in. The unknown presence was still there, lurking at the edge of the fleet, but the scans could not define it. It had no solid form, no heat signature, no clear mass. just an energy field stretching out like a shadow. It was something vast and ancient, a whisper in the dark that should not exist. More concerning was the second discovery. Several Zalthar ships, scattered across the fleet, were experiencing malfunctions. Some reported flickering lights and control issues. Others claimed that their weapon systems were unresponsive. And on one ship, the crew had sent a distress signal before all communication went silent. Vector narrowed his eyes. "Show me the ship," he commanded. The screen shifted, displaying a live feed from a nearby warship, one of the smaller Xalthar attack cruisers. The video feed flickered as if interference was corrupting the signal. Inside, the ship's corridors were dark. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the walls. The security cameras swept over the control room, but it was empty. The command crew was gone. The chairs sat abandoned, computer terminals still glowing. Weapons were scattered on the floor, as if dropped in a hurry. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, just emptiness. The camera moved deeper into the ship, scanning the long hallways, the storage bays, the soldier barracks, all empty. Every single crew member gone. Vector's claws curled into a fist. "Where is the crew?" No one answered. The camera feed continued, moving toward the ship's main hangar. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Rows of Zalthar fighters lined up, waiting for launch. But then, the camera caught something at the far end of the hangar. A shape stood there, just barely visible in the dim emergency lighting. It was tall, motionless, wrong. Vector leaned forward, his pulse quickening. Enhance. The image sharpened. The figure was unlike anything the Zalthar had ever encountered. It was humanoid, but its features were blurred, shifting like mist. It had no face, no clear form, just a deep, consuming darkness where its body should be. And yet, it was there, watching. Then, without warning, the camera feed cut to static. A deep silence filled the bridge. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. No one wanted to say what they were all thinking. The Zalthar were warriors, conquerors, rulers of the stars. They did not believe in ghosts. But something was out there. Something powerful. Vector refused to let fear take control. "Send a recovery team to that ship," he ordered. "Find out what happened." The officer hesitated. "Commander, if the entity is still there." "We are not running from shadows," Vector snapped. "Do as I say." The officer nodded stiffly and sent the command. Moments later, a squad of heavily armed soldiers launched from one of the nearby warships, their transport speeding toward the silent cruiser. The bridge remained quiet as everyone watched the feed from the soldiers' body cameras. The team moved swiftly, entering the abandoned ship through the docking bay. Their weapons were raised, scanning for any movement. Their breathing was steady, but their body language was tense. They passed through the empty halls, checking rooms as they went. Everything was untouched, as if the crew had simply vanished into thin air. Then, as they neared the control room, their comms crackled. A faint whisper echoed through the speakers. No words, just a whisper, low and distant, moving through the static. The soldiers froze. "Did you hear that?" one of them asked. No one answered. Then, something moved in the shadows. Thousands of years ago, when the Zalthar were still expanding their empire, they had attempted to conquer a distant world. It had seemed unremarkable, much like Earth. But when the invasion began, the fleet had disappeared. No survivors. No wreckage. Nothing. It was as if they had never existed. The Zalthar had sent more ships to investigate, but those ships vanished too. The Empire, fearing the unknown, erased all records of the event and never spoke of it again. The war had ended before it had begun. The enemy was never seen, never understood. And now, thousands of years later, that same enemy had returned. The historian's voice shook. "Commander, I believe we are facing them again." Vector's fists clenched, This was impossible. A species powerful enough to make fleets disappear should not exist. And yet, here they were, watching, waiting, warning them. Then, for the first time in his life, Vector felt something unfamiliar crawl into his mind. Doubt. The Xalthar did not retreat. They did not surrender. They conquered. Always. But this time, conquest might not be possible. And as Vector stared into the dark void beyond his fleet, he began to wonder, was Earth ever truly the target? Or had they simply wandered into something far worse? Vector stood frozen, his sharp claws digging into the metal console beneath him. His mind raced, struggling to make sense of what he had just learned. The Xalthar prided themselves on being the supreme conquerors of the stars. They had faced countless enemies and crushed them all. But now, for the first time in recorded history, they were up against something they could not fight, a force that had already erased them once. The fleet remained eerily silent. No one spoke. No one dared to move. The crew members on the bridge stared at the glowing text on the main screen. "We erased you once. Do not make us do it again." Vector's mind churned. Who were these beings? Were they gods? Ancient rulers of the stars? Or something even worse, something beyond comprehension? He turned sharply toward the historian. "Tell me everything," he demanded. "What else do the records say?" The historian swallowed, his fingers trembling as he scrolled through the ancient archives. "The records are incomplete," he admitted. "Most of the data was erased long ago. But there are fragments, whispers of something that once fought the Xalthar, something that did not fight with weapons, but with power beyond our understanding." Vector's tail flicked in frustration. What kind of power? The historian hesitated. "The records call it the Silence." The word sent a strange chill through the bridge. It wasn't just a name. It felt like something more, something alive. The Silence was not a species, the historian continued. It was a force, a presence that watched over certain worlds. No one knows where it came from, only that it protected planets from invaders. And when the Xalthar tried to take one of those planets long ago, the fleet simply ceased to exist. Vector's fists clenched. And Earth. The historian looked down at his screen. There is no mention of Earth in the records, but it is possible that it lies within the Silence's territory. The realization hit like a cold wave. Earth had never been unprotected. It had never been weak. The humans had nothing to do with this. Something else had been watching over them all along. Vector exhaled slowly, forcing his emotions under control. The Xalthar did not retreat. They did not surrender. But now, they had no choice. He turned toward his second-in-command. "Order all ships to prepare for emergency retreat." The officer hesitated. "Commander, if we run from this, we admit defeat." Vector's expression darkened. "We do not run. We survive." The fleet began powering up their engines, preparing to leave the system. But just as the process started, the ship's lights flickered again. The engines whined, their energy output dropping rapidly. The crew scrambled at their consoles. The Xalthar fleet streaked away from Earth at full speed, their warships cutting through the void like wounded beasts fleeing a predator. Vector stood at the command deck, staring at the fading image of the blue planet on the main screen. His claws remained clenched, his body rigid with tension. The Silence had let them go. But the warning still echoed in his mind. Because they are not ready. What did it mean? The humans were weak by Xalthar standards. Their technology was primitive. Their weapons were insignificant compared to the firepower of a galactic empire. And yet, the Silence, a force powerful enough to erase entire fleets, was watching over them, waiting. For what? Vector's second-in-command approached cautiously. "Commander, the fleet has cleared the system. No sign of pursuit." Vector didn't respond immediately. His gaze was still fixed on the screen, even though Earth was now just a distant speck. "Damage report." The officer checked his console. Minimal. Some energy fluctuations, but no physical damage. However, our data logs have been altered. Vector turned sharply. Altered. The officer nodded, his expression uneasy. All records of our encounter with the Silence have been corrupted. The logs contain gaps, as if entire sequences of time were erased. Vector's jaw tightened. They had been allowed to remember. Just enough. He exhaled slowly. And the crew? The officer hesitated before answering. They are shaken. Many reported hearing voices. Others felt an overwhelming sense of being watched. A few are refusing to speak at all. Vector closed his eyes briefly. His soldiers were some of the most ruthless warriors in the galaxy. They had razed entire civilizations to the ground without a second thought. And yet, one message from the Silence had broken them. His claws tapped against the console as he thought. The Xalthar Empire would demand answers. His superiors would not accept a retreat without reason. If he told them the truth, they would send another fleet, more ships, more warriors. And the Silence would erase them, just as they had done before. Vector's instincts screamed at him. This was not a battle that could be won. His decision was made. We classify this mission as a false alarm, he said coldly. Earth was deemed unworthy of conquest. There was no resistance, no battle, nothing of value. His second-in-command flinched. Commander, if we report that, they will not send another fleet, Vector interrupted. And that is the only way to ensure the survival of the Xalthar. The officer hesitated, then bowed his head in understanding. He turned to relay the order to the fleet. As the warships continued their retreat, Vector remained at the command deck, staring into the endless void. The Xalthar were conquerors. They had never run from a fight, never feared an enemy. But now, they had learned the truth. There were things in this universe that could not be fought. And Earth, despite its weakness, was not alone. It never had been. Whatever was waiting for humanity in the future, it was enough to make the Silence stand guard. And if a force powerful enough to erase entire fleets believed that humans were not ready yet, Vector shuddered. Because one day, they would be. The war fleet of the Xalthar moved through the void, putting more distance between themselves and Earth with every passing second. But even as the blue planet faded from their sensors, the presence of the Silence still lingered in Vector's mind. He had faced countless battles, led invasions across the stars, and conquered worlds that had stood for centuries. But this was different. This was the first time he had ever felt powerless. His second-in-command approached carefully. Commander, the official report has been transmitted. The Empire now believes Earth is insignificant and unworthy of conquest. Vector nodded, but his expression remained cold. He had done what was necessary to protect the Empire from itself. If the High Council knew the truth, they would not hesitate to send more ships, more warriors, to their deaths. But one question still haunted him. Why was the Silence waiting? The answer lay in the words that still echoed in his mind. Because they are not ready. Not ready for what? The humans were weak now. But if the Silence had deemed them important enough to protect, then one day, they would be ready. For what purpose? A war? A destiny greater than the Xalthar could comprehend. Vector turned his gaze toward the endless blackness of space. The Silence had given them a warning. Not just to leave Earth alone, but to fear what might come next. If the humans ever became what the Silence was waiting for, would they rise as protectors, or as something far worse? Vector exhaled slowly. He had no answers. Only time would tell. For now, the Xalthar would move on. They would find other planets to conquer, other battles to fight. The Empire would continue its expansion. But there would always be one world they would never return to. One world that had remained untouched, not because of its strength, but because of what lay ahead. Earth, the one conquest they would never claim. And perhaps in the distant future, when the humans finally became what they were meant to be, They would come looking for the Xalthar instead. The Xalthar fleet moved farther from Earth, the silence of space pressing in around them. But in Vectar's mind, the warning still echoed, because they are not ready. He had heard many threats in his time, had faced enemies who promised vengeance, civilizations that swore they would rise again. But this was different. The silence had not spoken with anger. It had not threatened war. It had simply stated a fact. And that was what truly unsettled him. Vectar stood alone in his private chambers, staring at the holographic display of Earth rotating slowly before him. The blue planet looked fragile, almost insignificant in the vastness of space, and yet something beyond his understanding had deemed it worthy of protection. A quiet chime interrupted his thoughts. The historian had requested an audience. Vectar allowed it. The doors slid open, and the historian stepped inside. His scales were a shade paler than before, his eyes filled with uncertainty. He hesitated before speaking. "Commander," I continued searching through the ancient archives. His voice was cautious, almost afraid. Vectar gestured for him to continue. "There are deeper records, files buried beneath layers of encryption, hidden for centuries. I do not know who placed them there, but I was able to recover fragments." The historian swallowed hard before whispering, "This is not the first time we have been warned." Vectar's body stiffened. "Explain." The historian hesitated, then pulled up a damaged data file. Faint lines of ancient text scrolled across the screen, barely readable. "It speaks of a world, long before the Xalthar Empire was born. A world that reached too far, that grew too fast." He paused. "They became powerful. They conquered. They believed they were unstoppable." Vectar narrowed his eyes. "What happened to them?" The historian's voice was barely above a whisper. The silence erased them. The room fell deathly quiet. Vectar stared at the historian, his mind racing. The Xalthar had always believed themselves to be the strongest, the greatest force in the galaxy. But now, he was faced with the possibility that another species had once thought the same. And they were gone. "Do the records say who they were?" he asked, his voice tight. The historian shook his head. "No, only that their name was lost. Their history erased. The silence did not destroy them in war. They did not leave ruins or wreckage. They simply removed them, as if they had never existed at all." Vectar felt a deep, unsettling cold settle in his chest. The silence did not act out of hatred. They did not conquer. They simply ensured that some civilizations never reached a certain point. And now Earth was under their protection, because the humans were not ready. But one day, they would be. Vectar turned back to the hologram of Earth, watching the small planet spin slowly in the dark void. His claws tightened. The Xalthar had escaped today, but the future was uncertain, because the moment the humans became what the silence was waiting for, they might be unstoppable. "You said." The void stretched endlessly before the Xalthar fleet, but Vectar's mind remained tethered to a single point in the universe, Earth. Even now, as his ships drifted farther from that blue world, the weight of what he had learned refused to leave him. The silence had protected Earth, not because of its strength, not because of its technology, but because of what the humans would become. And worse still, this was not the first time a species had reached this turning point. The historian's words echoed in his mind. They reached too far. They grew too fast. And the silence erased them. Vectar knew conquest. He knew war, destruction, and the hunger of an empire that never stopped expanding. The Xalthar had always believed they were the greatest force in the galaxy. But now he was faced with a terrifying truth. They were not the first. And if the silence had erased another empire before them, what if the Xalthar were next? A cold realization crept into his thoughts. The silence had given them a warning. But what if it was more than that? What if the silence was watching them too? His claws tightened around the edge of his console. His mind raced with possibilities. If the silence had eliminated another species for becoming too powerful, then there were only two possibilities. 1. The Xalfar were safe, for now. 2. They were already being judged. His thoughts darkened further. What if the reason the silence had let them leave was not just to protect Earth, but to see what the Xalfar would do next? Would they continue expanding? Would they continue their path of endless conquest? Or would they make the same mistake as the ones before them and vanish? Vectar turned to the historian. Do we have any records of direct encounters with the silence? The historian shook his head. Only rumors, fleets that disappeared without explanation. Planets that were once thriving civilizations, now nothing but empty, untouched worlds, as if their inhabitants never existed. A slow dread settled in Vectar's chest. The silence didn't fight wars. They simply removed what they deemed unfit. And the Xalfar, they had built their empire on war, on destruction, on believing they were superior to all others. If the silence truly erased those who became too dangerous, then the Xalfar were standing at the edge of their own extinction. A decision had to be made. Vectar could report what happened truthfully. He could warn the High Council, tell them that the silence was real, that Earth was protected, that something in the shadows of the universe was watching. But he already knew how the Council would react. They would see it as a challenge. They would gather a stronger fleet, study Earth from a distance, send spies to learn what made the humans so special. They would keep pushing, because the Xalfar never stopped. And if they did that, if they ignored the warning, then one day they might find themselves staring into the abyss. And there would be no warning that time. Just an empty void, where the Xalfar Empire once stood. Vectar inhaled slowly, then gave the only order that could save them. Erase all records of Earth. The historian looked up, startled. Commander, you heard me. Vectar's voice was cold, firm. There was no battle, no message, no silence, no Earth. The historian hesitated, then slowly nodded. He understood. Some knowledge was too dangerous. Vectar turned back to the empty space before him, his mind heavy with the truth. The Xalfar had always believed they were the greatest force in the galaxy. But now, they knew the truth. There was something far greater. And if they wanted to survive, they would never set foot near Earth again. Because the next time the silence spoke, it would not be a warning. The void of space surrounded the Xalfar fleet like an endless abyss, but for the first time in his life, Vectar felt truly small within it. Earth had been a conquest, a routine invasion, a simple addition to the growing list of worlds conquered by the Xalfar Empire. But now, it had become something else entirely. A forbidden place, a world guarded by a force beyond comprehension. A force that had erased others before, without war, without destruction, simply removed them from existence. And now, the Xalfar stood at the edge of the same fate. Vectar stared at the holographic star map before him. Earth was now just a memory, a ghost in the data logs, erased as if they had never been there. The official reports would say it was a dead world, unworthy of conquest. Nothing more. The Council would not send another fleet. The Xalfar would move on. But Vectar could not. His claws tapped against the console as he turned to his second-in-command. How many other species have we wiped out? The officer frowned at the question. Thousands, Commander, maybe more. Vectar's gaze darkened. And how many of them were given a warning before they vanished? The officer hesitated. None. A heavy silence filled the room. Vectar already knew what that meant. The silence didn't warn civilizations. They didn't negotiate. They simply acted, erased. And yet, they had warned the Xalfar. Why? The answer was chilling. The Xalfar had been spared, for now. But the fact that they had been warned at all meant only one thing. The silence was watching them. They were being judged. Vectar clenched his fists. The Empire had always seen itself as unstoppable. But if they continued their path of endless war, if they ignored this warning, one day they too would disappear. He took a slow breath, then made the hardest decision of his life. The Empire must change. His second-in-command looked startled. "Commander." Vector turned, his expression unreadable. "If we continue as we are, if we keep conquering, keep destroying, the silence will erase us. It is only a matter of time." The officer hesitated, then lowered his voice. "The High Council will never allow it. The Xalfar do not change." Vector's eyes gleamed with something new, something dangerous. "Then we make them." His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a coming storm. The Xalfar were at a crossroads. They could continue down the path of war and risk annihilation, or they could evolve, become something greater. Vector had no intention of watching his species vanish like the nameless civilizations before them. If the silence was waiting to see what humanity would become, then perhaps, just maybe, the Xalfar had one last chance to decide what they would become as well.